Hi viewers, welcome to my channel, The Nimbus Studio. The topic for this video session is software quality. It's a very favorite topic of mine because as a practitioner with a little over 2 decades of experience in IT industry, I've had the good fortune of my projects being candidate projects for several assessments like the prestigious SCI CMM level 5. So I hope I've developed a decent proficiency in this topic to talk to you about this, not from the theoretical approach to this as a process or a compliance perspective from or as a top management dictate, but more as a mindset that everybody in the value chain needs to adopt, because at the end of the day, software quality is achieved only as a collective output by all people in the team participating with the right mindset towards achieving quality, and it's never achieved in an autopilot mode, because some of the best minds could have defined the processes and methodologies in the organization, but the constant flux of people in the organization, it is very important to understand that unless the organizational culture allows a mindset of quality to be formed, it's very difficult to achieve true quality. To achieve quality in the true sense of the word. So with that strong hope that I'll be able to contribute to your understanding in that way, let's dive into the rest of the presentation. So what is quality? Uh, Quality can be looked at from two different perspectives. One from the perspective of the customer, and the other is from the perspective of the producer of the product or the service. From the perspective of a customer, it's kind of intuitive to understand quality because, in a way, we're all customers in our own right. Uh, it can be perceived in many ways, some of which I would like to illustrate. It's perceived sometimes as the value of a thing relative to its price. So we say it's value for money. That's a very common term that we say. Uh, a good example that comes to my mind is if you take the mindset of a customer who buys probably a small hatchback car, he's not probably going to expect a rain sensing wiper or a rain sensing headlamp and get disappointed by it, because we're talking about an entirely different market segment of luxury cars where probably like a Benz or a BMW customer might have that in his mindset. So when you view it as a thing relative to its price, somebody buying a hatchback car is not going to feel it's inferior in quality just because it doesn't have those advanced features. Another way to look at quality is the degree of excellence of something. Okay, typically you will have a lot of domains in which there will be gold standards in that domain. If you take a mobile phone, the first thing that comes to my own mind is the iPhone. Although, to be honest, I've never bought an iPhone in my entire life. That's a different issue because the way I handle things and the cost of replacement kind of is too prohibitively high for me if I become an iPhone customer. So I've always been an Android patron. But the degree of excellence of something is something to relate to is as a gold standard. So my mind automatically compares every phone that I buy as to how much it compares to an iPhone, whether I am uh, having as close to an iPhone as possible is what my mind thinks. A blunt way of looking at quality from the eyes of a customer is fitness for purpose. Let's take a airplane seat belt. It doesn't need to look fancy, beautiful, or cute. It just needs to hold you in place when the aircraft hits turbulence, irrespective of how much you weigh, right? Bluntly, it's fitness for purpose. Very simple. Or a textbook way of looking at it is conformance to specification. Uh, One classic example is that of a pharmaceutical drug. It meets specification only if it's prepared in the exact formula in which it is, uh, it's designed, or it's structured. So a drug has to adhere to a conformance to specification in the highest precision possible for it to be passing so many clinical trials and get cleared by various administrative authorities and things like that. So these are various ways of perceiving quality from an end customer perspective, and we can all relate to it intuitively. But if you look at quality from the eyes of a producer of a service or product, it's an entirely different kettle of fish, because for them it stops being just a destination. It's more about the journey. They cannot afford to achieve quality by sheer accident or without knowing how they achieved it. The whole thing has to be repeatable day in and day out. and if and if you throw in the constant churn of workforce that they have, right? If you put all these variables together, achieving quality which is fitness for purpose as perceived by the end customer by following methodologies and practices to make it repeatable as a process, and without compromising key variables like time to market or the time it takes for the provider to bring it to market, or without compromising the cost that they spend in bringing it to market by avoiding rework, and without time overrun, and without even compromising the quality of life of the work staff, which is nothing but effort. So without losing the balance between time, cost and effort, to be able to do this as a repeatable process is not possible without it being a constant journey. And to be a constant journey, who are making this a constant journey? Is it enough if you just have a process, a methodology, or the steps to produce something defined clearly? Will it automatically work as an autopilot mode? It's obviously being executed by people, right? So that's where it becomes a mindset related activity. So let's look at how quality is achieved. So very clearly, quality is achieved only through the toil of human effort. Because without human beings participating in the value chain, it's not going to be possible for any producer to achieve true quality. Especially the exalted definition of quality is something like this. It is doing the right things, which is conformance, simultaneously by doing the things right, which is compliance, and not only first time, but every time. To have such an exalted definition of quality, it's not possible with, without everybody in the team participating with a quality mindset. Because the fact of the matter is, human beings are involved in a major portion of the value chain of producing any product or service. It might seem very fancy to read in editorials that automation is taking over the world and slowly people will lose jobs and everything is going to be automated and predictable, but that's many years away, even in pockets where it's possible. That's how I see it. Human beings are going to be pretty much an integral part of the value chain of producing goods and services. So if that's the case, it can never be achieved with a defensive mindset by even one person in the team, nor can it be achieved always by an individual's brilliance in the team. It has to always be a collective output, because the strength of a chain is always the weakest link. While that may sound cliched, let's take a practical example. Let's take a sport like cricket itself. MS Dhoni is known as the best finisher in the game. But can he finish every game? Is it humanly possible? He may be a legend. I myself love him so much, but it's foolish of me to expect him to do it every time. So if you apply the exalted definition of quality to say first time, every time, it needs to be achieved only with the full participation of everyone in the team. So the question to ask here, or ask yourself rather, is, am I that weak link in this team? Am I the one because of which quality as per conformance, right, is achieved, no doubt, but by a lot of factors in compliance going for a toss? And am I the root cause for it, or am I at least one of the root causes for it? If that's the honest question you ask yourself, then automatically you will concede that developing a quality mindset is the only way forward to become a part of the stronger portion of the chain. So let's see, what are the classic mindset blocks that prevent someone from adopting this mindset. I'm not saying these are the entire set of mindset blocks, but these are illustrative and what I have come across in my experience. One very classic mindset block is people saying, I am not in a mission critical role. I'm not in the business of saving lives. I'm not like an airplane pilot where, currently 250 lives are in my control. This much of quality orientation is enough for me in my role. That's nothing but taking the easy way out. Another classic mindset is, why should I bother about all quality, mumbo jumbo and all? It's unnecessary overhead for me. My customer is happy. What do I lose by not following a quality process or a quality mindset? At the end of the day, customer is king. He is happy. The most widely prevalent mindset block. Is this adding any skill set to me? Is it augmenting my resume either for getting good promotions within my organization or improving my market value in the job market? This is probably one of the most widely prevalent mindset block. Let's now change the whole equation, turn it on its head and look at the same set of situations slightly differently. Picture a calm weekend where you're probably going out with your family, you're in a mall, you're in the middle of watching your favorite movie. Suddenly the phone, rings, and it's the test engineer who's frantically reaching out to you because now the project's critical path has shifted to testing phase. He is now reaching out to you in the middle of a weekend and saying, boss, it's a showstopper and it's your code which is failing and I'm not able to proceed with my testing. So either I stop testing or I escalate this and stop testing and escalate this, or you come and help me right now so that we can quickly close this issue and move ahead. Does it or does it not sound to you suddenly as if your life is in the clutch of a mission critical moment? Everybody, most of us rather, are working only with such pseudo mission critical situations controlling our life. If only we had a zero defect mindset when we develop our work product. I'm not saying this can be eliminated. I should rather be saying will be eliminated, but I will be a bit magnanimous. It won't be eliminated, but it will be minimized to a large extent. That itself is a great improvement in quality of life. Let's look at the other situation. Is it enough if your current customer is happy? What about your paymaster? What if you're compromising effort, time and cost and making your customer happy? What if you're giving a few requirements free on the slide because it is a bit tolerant towards defective work products that you're shipping him? All of this is possible. Customers can quickly change loyalty. Even if the customer organization doesn't change, the line manager can change. The new guy or the new customer that you start working in life, could be a stickler for perfection. And then you're dead meat with this attitude, I mean to say. So your permanent reality is your paymaster. So it's better to counterbalance the time, cost, and effort variables of a paymaster rather than manage your customer's happiness. You might easily block me with your appraisal logic, but then unless you are doing justice to your role, how can you even claim yourself as a victim of an appraisal cycle, right? So this is fundamental ethics to your paymaster. So look at it that way and you will definitely be able to conquer that mindset block. Let me come to the most important mindset block. The question I would like to ask is, are you someone who is more interested in a fly-by-night skill that keeps you relevant just for today? Or are you looking at a long-standing innings in the industry where you want to be successful across all roles that you will play in your future? Today you may be a developer, tomorrow you will be a lead, then a manager. That's when the weight of the average quality of the team will hit you when you're in the line of fire facing the customer, or when you're in the line of fire facing the manager, who is in turn facing the wrath of the customer. So if you want to really be successful throughout your life, especially when you're in an offshore situation, career growth comes only by managing more people. It doesn't come by learning new technology alone. So adopting a quality mindset, I'm sure, will elongate your career span in a way that you can't even think of right now. Especially if you're starting your career right now, this is the right stage in which you adopt this mindset completely. So let's build some quality vocabulary. If you've stuck this far with me, you will definitely probably have a mind voice which I'm hoping which says, okay boss, I'm on board now, but teach me how to do it. Don't just keep giving me yarn on mindset and mindset tuning and all. Excellent. That's the intent of my whole presentation. Because I firmly believe that not having a quality mindset is not just an attitude issue or a competence issue. It is the lack of training in the quality vocabulary. Haven't you found people fluently speaking on the stage? Is it just stage fear that they have conquered? Before that, they have conquered the vocabulary of the language, without which they can't speak confidently. Any language. So even before stage fear comes the vocabulary of a language. So similarly, if you want to adopt the mindset, better know the vocabulary of quality. So with that intention, I've put together a few slides to quickly take you through the vocabulary of quality. So it's viewed as several aspects. One is via its dimensions. I'll quickly summarize in this slide. Product quality versus process quality. Quality is implemented as a model, which is famously known as the V model. I will come to it in a bit. Then quality when viewed as outputs, how it terms the outputs. You need to understand key terms like software configurable items and quality records. When it's viewed as a role, you have to understand the importance of the maker-checker duality principle. And finally, we'll view it as a certification. What's the importance of a certification? So very clearly, to summarize as a definition, right? I'm just going to read it out aloud, but I'll leave it to you to internalize. Quality is assured along the dimensions of product and process quality by following a process of verification and validation, producing outputs of software configurable items evidenced by quality records. I missed that word, evidenced by quality records, and involving a pair of roles called the maker and the checker. And as a further stamp of authority, it is done by reusing best practices or getting a stamp of certification like TQM or ISMS kind of external stamp. That's the quick definition of how quality is achieved in quality's own vocabulary. Quality viewed via its dimensions. So now I'm going to drill down into each aspect of quality. So quality can be understood as two dimensions: product or service quality and process quality. Product quality or service quality is nothing but doing the right things, and process quality is nothing but doing things right. It might sound like a jugglery of words to you right now, but it's very important how the apostrophes are placed. Doing right things, as you already saw in the definition of quality, uh, there's two things: conformance and compliance, right? Doing the right things is nothing but conformance. Doing the things right is nothing but compliance. Doing right things is doing the right thing as per the intended audience of your product or service. It could differ from intended audience. One audience may think this is right, another audience may think another thing is right. Just like the difference between a customer buying a small hatchback and someone buying a luxury car. So the right thing differs as per the end customer. Doing things right is slightly different. There cannot be two right way of doing the same thing, and the right way of doing that thing has to be documented and has to be followed. That's all about process compliance. So let's say there are 5 right things to be achieved in the project as far as 5 features are concerned. In implementing each of those 5 features, there will be the correct way to specify, write the specification for it. There will be a correct way to design it, or there will be the right way to design it. There will be a right way to write code for it. There will be a right way to do the unit testing for it. There will be a right way to do the integration testing for it. There will be a right way to do system testing for it, and there will be a right way of doing the acceptance testing for it. If the right way is followed in each of the steps to realize each of those right things, then the project is supposed to have met both the conformance and compliance objectives. So I just want you to internalize this without falling in the English trap, and understand that product quality, only when achieved via process quality, is true quality. Now let's look at quality as a process model. When quality itself is achieved via following processes, quality itself should have some pillars of processes supporting its definition, and that's what the V model is all about. So it's not called the V model out of sheer accident. It's because the pillars of the processes which supports it on either side is nothing but verification and validation, both of which start with a V. And for cynics, we may say it could even be a visually represented as a U. It's V for victory if you want, right? Because at the end of the day, quality has to help you win. Now it's intuitive for anybody to understand that on the left and right side of the V, what has been placed opposite to each other are the software development lifecycle stages, starting right from user requirements gathering to requirement specification to high level and low level design to coding, after which the V starts bending upwards, because that's when the unit testing starts. It goes into integration testing, it goes into system testing, and finally acceptance testing. So what's the fundamental difference between verification and validation? Verification is applicable to the downside of the V because all the software lifecycle stages on the downside of the V are highly theoretical in nature. They don't produce tangible outputs. So when I say tangible outputs, it doesn't mean that they don't produce any output at all. They produce more of documentary outputs. Even source code, in a very, very theoretical sense of the word, is nothing but the documentation of the application that runs. The runtime instance is never the document. The source code stands for the document of the entire application that runs. In fact, you can have just source code written if you're a brilliant guy without any of the previous steps of documentation. That's what happens in most projects, but I'm just saying source code is the most fundamental documentation of the end customer's build of software. Okay, now what is possible to check when you have written out, when you have only a written document, is you don't have something tangible to run and see how it behaves or how it performs in a runtime environment. So you have to know the full details of the domain, including the syntactical familiarity of the concepts involved, to be able to do verification, because here in verification you're checking if the things are done in a right way. You take the user requirements, run it past a checklist and see if all the requirements have been elicited. You inspect the requirement specification physically to see if all requirements have been translated into a scalable specification or even a practical implementable specification. Then you take the low level and high level design and see if the specification has been implemented in a scalable way so that even changes to specification and user requirements are handled without too much of rework of the code. In coding, you check if everybody writes the code in the same way, follows coding standards, and so on and so forth. So the syntactical familiarity of the language in which the code is written is highly important. So verification is a white box way of inspecting whether the work product implements the right way of doing everything which is right. Okay. On the ascension of the V, it's all black box, because now you have a tangible thing which can be run and seen. So you can feel it. So there, it's only a question of ticking the boxes and saying that the right things have been done. Okay. It's more evidence of the right thing, manifesting itself in the runtime instance of the application. So unit testing validates that the right things have been done in the code. Integration testing validates whether the right things have been done in the design, as per the design. System testing validates the right things done in the requirement specification. And acceptance testing validates whether the user requirements that have been elicited have all been manifested in the final software that is built. So that's one interesting way of understanding the upside of the V, as to how every partner phase validates its predecessor phase or its sibling phase in the software development lifecycle. It might sound that I'm talking about an outdated waterfall model. I don't agree with that. If someone says nowadays we follow sprint, agile model, these are all outdated. All these steps are intrinsically happening even in a 2-week sprint. So the concept is something that can be force fitted to any new age model. So understand this as a generic construct, that applies universally to any software development lifecycle methodology that you ultimately choose to run your project on. Okay, so that's a very important understanding to have. It's just like coding, right? Whatever be the language, whether it's modular language or a procedural language or object-oriented language or artificial intelligence, Python, PHP, C, C++, V, C++. At the end of the day, what is programming? Sequencing, branching, looping. Anybody who's strong in this as a concept and who can write pseudocode which can implement the requirement in sequencing, branching, looping can actually code in any language. Language is only syntactical familiarity. Coding is all about conceptual clarity. So similarly, this V model is universally applicable whatever be the software development lifecycle methodology that the project follows. I hope that's clear and you are able to appreciate that. Now let's view quality as an output of configuration management. Configuration management is a very important topic. It's a separate topic by itself, but I am only using that to convey how quality gives terminologies to the outputs of the software development lifecycle. I already told you on the descending side of the V, they are all theoretical outputs. Even before that, the entire software development lifecycle is oriented towards one target release version of a software. But every phase on the descending side of the V produces outputs which are inputs for the next stage, but each of those outputs can have their own version history. A user requirement document can go through 10 to 15 versions even before it can become a baseline worthy enough for the next phase to start consuming. How many versions that every phase output goes through is clearly only a function of the quality in which it was written and the quality of the reviewer. That's it. So configuration management is nothing but ensuring that the relationship is tracked for a target release version. What are the release version histories of every artifact on the descending side of the V maps to? So in achieving release version 1, the user requirements document could have gone through 15 version iterations. The requirement specifications could have gone through 10 version iterations. The design could have gone through 5 iterations. And finally, the code could have gone through several iterations of its own. All these together form part of one release cycle and one target release version. So the outputs of the software development lifecycle stages on the descending side of the V are called software configurable items because every output is a version controlled output having a version history. Then what's a quality record? A quality record is nothing but the record which evidences that a software configurable items version was inspected and reviewed and the remarks were incorporated in the next version submitted again for review. So a quality record is something which is an evidence and it doesn't have a version of its own, but every quality record is created against a SCI version. That is how we need to understand. So suppose a user requirements document went through 20 versions before it got finalized as a baseline. It means 19 quality records should be there to evidence the 19 times it was reviewed and finally the last iteration that got baseline. Then there's another class of documents called the managed and controlled documents. It's similar to software configurable item, but slightly different. Managed and control documents also are version control documents, but they are not outputs of a software development lifecycle phase. They are common to the entire software development lifecycle itself. Typically, the project plan itself is a managed and controlled document for the project, because it talks about the methodology that is going to be used in the project. It talks about the project plan, schedule, the resourcing. That also will be reviewed by relevant people in the management, and that will also go through iterations before it gets baseline, and it will also keep getting revised every time there's a scope change in the project and whatever happens to the project. So that's version control, but that's not related to the software development lifecycle, so it's called management control documents. Another brilliant example of a management control document is the quality management system itself. So we just discussed that the user requirements document of a specific project can go through 20 revisions within a project, but the user requirements document itself in an organization will be captured as per a standard template as offered by the quality management system. So that also will get, the template gets reviewed and gets incorporated with comments and gets baselined in the quality management system, right? So the template for capturing user requirements document in a company is a version control document. It's a management control document. It's not a SCA, because it's not the output of a project's phase. It's outside the scope of all projects. So that's again a classic example of a managed and control document. So I hope these three terms are very clear to you: software configurable item and quality record. So very clearly, the output of the phases on the descending side of the V are all software configurable items. The verification reports are all quality records, and every output on the ascension of the V, which is nothing but a test report, is a quality record again. Okay, a key difference there that I want to provide is a testing team writes a lot of test cases that also gets reviewed. So test case document is a software configurable item having its own version history, but a test report is a quality record because it's the evidence of testing having been conducted. So if it has pass fail status recorded, it becomes a quality record. So a particular version of the finalized test case repository is taken, the tests are run, and the results are recorded in unit testing, integration testing, system testing, acceptance testing. So the test report is a quality record, and the test case is again a software configurable item. I hope the terminologies are making sense to you and the topic seems a little more friendly to relate. Now, quality when viewed as a role, this is very simply put, it's the independence of the maker and checker, right? If someone tests their own code, that's actually not testing at all, because there will be a huge bias. There won't be a recording of a defect. They will fix things on the fly and again test it. It doesn't help anyone. At the end of the day, that attitude should be there while writing the code to say I will produce a zero defect code when somebody else tests, not when I myself test, because I can always keep testing, finding bugs, and then finally say I gave a zero defect output to a tester. That's not the ideal zero defect output. The ideal zero defect output is when you write code and zero defects are found by the checker, who is an independent person. What I've tried to clarify in this slide in terms of color coding is integration testing and unit testing typically are done by not by own person, but somebody who's a peer reviewer in the same team. So the coding's unit testing would probably be done by a peer developer. Integration testing will either be done by a slightly senior developer or a project lead himself. So it's still within the team. People who have stakes to not be found fault with as a set of people together. So it's slightly an internal testing, but still it should be a maker checker independence where it's at least a peer-to-peer review. System testing and acceptance testing are obviously done by third parties outside of the development team. So system testing is outside the development team but is at least within the organization, whereas acceptance testing is even outside of the organization, typically a sample set of users in the end customer organization. So maker checker independence is what ultimately ensures that quality is present in the output of every software development lifecycle phase. importance of maker checker independence, right? I'm very sorry that I put this dark slide, but this is what has happened in the last 2 years, right? I have nothing but sheer respect for the engineering capability of Boeing, but it's very sad to see what they are, undergoing in the last few years, just because they took their foot off the pedal of the quality pedal slightly. Do you think what happened to these two planes, the Max 8, first the Lion Air and then the Kenyan Airlines crash, was it due to pilot error? It is definitely human error, but it's not pilot error. It's the human error involved in the production of Boeing. They almost self-certified this aircraft with catastrophic impact. And now their entire reputation is on the line. A company with a 50-year or more a history of existence of nothing but engineering quality of the highest level is now not being trusted by any flying public. There used to be a famous saying, right? I ain't going if it's not a Boeing. Now, unfortunately, it seems to be the entire opposite. It just takes this much of a time for such a customer adage to completely inverse. So it's a stark reminder for all of us as to how important it is to have quality as a mindset right from the top management to the lowermost person in the team. So this is a classic case of top management's quality consciousness lacking, because apparently Boeing had a lot of management change from McDonnell Douglas, and they've now become more worried about the total cost of ownership of the airline rather than safety features. So still it's a lack of a quality mindset which led to the whole catastrophe. So it's a stark reminder, but let's at least use this to remind ourselves of the importance of quality as a mindset. Quality viewed as a certification. Now let's use quality's vocabulary itself to understand it. So quality, which is conformance achieved via compliance, and compliance being dictated by the verification and validation process, which is orchestrated using templates drawn from your company's quality management system. That's a project by itself, right? If that's a project by itself, then there has to be a maker checker independence, right? So it needs to have a verification and validation process done by an external certifying authority to say that indeed the QMS of this organization is of a mature level and it's indeed being used by projects diligently, and the quality that is achieved in the sample set of projects that are candidate projects are indeed meeting conformance without a compromise in compliance, which is true quality has been achieved. So this is all about the certifying process. Now, why is a certifying process even needed? Obviously, in a business environment where you have to keep running even to stay in the same position, right? You need an external stamp of authority to say that this company is ISO certified or CICMM level certified, level 5, level 3 certified, because your competition is already certified. So it's a no-brainer as to why it's needed from a marketability standpoint. But what is more important is the certification process, which certifies that the company is following the quality management system properly, also ensures that the company is a data oriented company. It's very important for companies to be metrics and data oriented, because at the end of the day, what cannot be measured cannot be controlled. It's very simple as that. And what is not measured honestly is as good as not being measured. So if you agree to this, let's look at a very important insight which I got when I participated in a lot of these assessments. One of the things that the lead assessor told are still stuck onto my mind. He said, an enlightened company will never use the metrics or defects data that comes from a project for performance appraisal. That's because otherwise it stops being true. Only false reports get generated, and that's not good for the organization, because let's understand the process. When metrics are collected out of thousands of projects in a honest way, it's not collected for the fun of it. What is used out of that is statistical analysis are done by a very intelligent think tank in the organization, They go through all the project's data and they average it, apply a lot of statistics, and come up with organizational baselines like productivity and so on and so forth. So that helps future estimation of projects to say this project will take this much effort and cost and time as per my organization's baseline. So projects will also stop being undersold or oversold, if you understand what I mean. So everything contributes ultimately to the quality of output. So this metrics which gets averaged out at the organization level, and when you get true organizational baselines, it improves your pre-sales process itself, or the ability to estimate correctly when you win a project. So there's no doubt that quality as a mindset, all pervading mindset, feeds into itself, and it becomes a very, very healthy value chain. So I really hope that, I really hope that this presentation has put several things in the right perspective for you to at least embark on this journey of developing a quality mindset. And I truly hope that this has helped you, or will rather help you in your future career. Thank you.